For years, one of the biggest arguments against Linux was always the same: it's too complicated. It's only for programmers. You have to use the terminal for everything. It's not ready for normal people. And Windows users would confidently say, at least Windows is easy. But something has quietly changed. Linux is no longer the complicated system people remember. In fact, Linux is becoming so easy to use that Windows may have officially lost its biggest long-standing advantage. Let's be honest about history. Back in the early 2000s, installing Linux was not for the faint of heart. You had to manually partition drives, configure bootloaders, hunt down drivers, and pray that your Wi-Fi chipset was supported. If your graphics card acted up, you were diving into forums for hours. The desktop environments were inconsistent, software installation required obscure package commands, and hardware compatibility was unpredictable. Meanwhile, Windows came pre-installed, drivers were handled automatically most of the time, and users rarely saw anything beyond a familiar desktop and a start menu. For the average consumer, Windows felt safe and simple. But fast forward to today, and the landscape looks completely different. Modern Linux distributions like Ubuntu, Linux, Mint, Zorin OS, Fedora, and Pop_OS have transformed the experience. You download an ISO file, flash it to a USB drive, boot it, and you're greeted with a polished graphical installer that walks you through everything step by step. The system automatically detects your hardware, configures drivers, sets up partitions, and installs in minutes. In many cases, it's faster and smoother than installing Windows itself. Even dual booting has become easier. Installers now automatically detect existing operating systems and configure bootloaders without requiring manual intervention. The fear of breaking your system during installation is largely gone for mainstream users. You don't need to understand file systems or boot sectors anymore. The technical barrier has been dramatically lowered. Then there's hardware support. This used to be one of Linux's biggest weaknesses. Wi-Fi adapters wouldn't work out of the box. Printers required advanced configuration. GPU drivers were painful. But today, the Linux kernel includes massive amounts of built-in drivers. Most laptops boot up with working Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, touchpads, webcams, and sound immediately. Graphics drivers for AMD and Intel are excellent out of the box. Even NVIDIA, once notorious for Linux friction, has improved significantly with better driver integration and Wayland support. On many machines, Linux simply works without needing driver downloads or bloatware utilities. Compare that to Windows, which often installs dozens of manufacturer utilities, background services, and update agents that slow down performance. Linux systems boot clean. No trial antivirus pop-ups, no forced cloud login, no Candy Crush pre-installed. Just a desktop, ready to use. And that desktop experience has evolved dramatically. One of the common criticisms was that Linux desktops looked outdated or inconsistent. That's no longer true. Modern desktop environments like GNOME and KDE Plasma are sleek, fluid, and highly polished. KDE Plasma in particular offers customization levels that Windows users can only dream of, while still being intuitive for newcomers. GNOME provides a minimal focused workflow that reduces clutter and distractions. Cinnamon offers a traditional layout that feels instantly familiar to Windows users. The visual gap has closed. In some cases, Linux desktops feel more modern and cohesive than Windows itself. Animations are smooth. Themes are consistent. High DPI scaling works better in many scenarios than it does on Windows. And users can tailor the interface without downloading sketchy third-party tools that break after every update. Speaking of updates, this is another area where Linux has quietly pulled ahead. Windows updates have become a frustration point for many users. Forced restarts. Updates installing at inconvenient times. Major feature updates that take ages to complete. Systems rebooting unexpectedly. In contrast, Linux updates are typically fast, transparent, and under the user's control. You click Update when you're ready. The process usually completes in minutes. Reboots are rarely mandatory except for kernel updates. Even then, tools like live patching can eliminate downtime entirely. Package management is another game changer. On Windows, installing software traditionally meant visiting websites, downloading .exe files, clicking through installers, and hoping you didn't accidentally install bundled junk. On Linux, software comes from centralized repositories. You open a software center, search for what you want, click install, and it's done. Everything updates together through one unified system. No separate updaters for Chrome, Adobe, Java, and random utilities running in the background. And now, with technologies like Flatpak and Snap, installing software is even more user-friendly and secure. Applications are sandboxed, dependencies are bundled, compatibility issues are reduced. Users don't need to understand how shared libraries work. It just installs and runs. Gaming was once Windows' ultimate advantage. For decades, if you wanted to play games, you used Windows. That was the rule. But Proton and Steam Play have changed the equation entirely. Thousands of Windows games now run on Linux with little to no configuration. In many cases, users simply click, install, and play. Performance is often comparable, and sometimes even better. Major titles that once required Windows now run smoothly on Linux systems. The Steam Deck has played a massive role in this transformation. It runs Linux. Millions of gamers are unknowingly using Linux to play their favorite titles. Developers are optimizing for Proton. Anti-cheat support has improved dramatically. The narrative that Linux can't game is rapidly becoming outdated. Then there's system performance. Linux distributions tend to run efficiently, even on older hardware. Many users are installing Linux on aging laptops and discovering that their machines feel brand new again. Boot times are faster. Background processes are fewer. Memory usage is lower. There's no heavy telemetry constantly running in the background. The system feels responsive and lightweight. Privacy is another factor. Windows has increasingly integrated telemetry, online accounts, and data collection into its core experience. While some of it can be disabled, it often requires digging through settings or using unofficial tools. Linux, by contrast, is transparent. Most distributions collect little to no user data by default. There are no ads in the file manager, no suggested apps in the start menu, no lock screen promotions. For many users, that simplicity feels refreshing. Accessibility has also improved. Screen readers, magnifiers, and accessibility tools have matured significantly in Linux environments. The idea that Linux is only for developers is outdated. Teachers, students, writers, designers, and casual users are adopting it because it simply works. Even productivity software gaps are shrinking. LibreOffice is powerful and compatible with Microsoft Office formats for most everyday tasks. Web-based applications mean that many tools run identically, regardless of operating system. Google Docs, Microsoft 365 Online, Slack, Zoom, Discord, and countless other services function seamlessly in a browser. The OS matters less than it used to, which ironically benefits Linux the most. Installation of proprietary apps has also become easier. Many major applications now provide native Linux versions or Flatpak packages. For those that don't, compatibility layers and containerized solutions fill the gap. The average user no longer needs to compile software from source or understand complex terminal commands. And let's talk about the terminal myth. Yes, Linux has a powerful terminal. Yes, advanced users love it. But modern Linux systems do not require terminal usage for everyday tasks. Software installation, system settings, network configuration, display settings, printer setup, all of it is accessible through graphical interfaces. The terminal is a tool, not a requirement. The onboarding experience has also improved. Distributions now offer welcome screens, driver managers, update managers, and app stores that guide new users step by step. Communities provide extensive documentation and friendly support. Video tutorials are everywhere. Switching to Linux in 2026 is dramatically easier than it was even 5 years ago. Meanwhile, Windows has grown more complex, account requirements, cloud integration, Copilot AI features baked into the system, settings panels that are split between legacy control panels and modern interfaces, ads in the start menu, increasing hardware requirements, TPM checks, secure boot requirements, system restrictions. For some users, Windows no longer feels simple. It feels controlled. The irony is striking. Linux, once considered intimidating, now offers clarity and control. Windows, once praised for simplicity, now layers additional complexity in the name of ecosystem integration and monetization. This shift is psychological as much as technical. People are trying Linux and discovering it's not scary, it's not difficult, it's not unstable, it's just another operating system, one that respects user choice. Of course, Linux isn't perfect. There are still niche hardware cases that require tweaking. Some professional software remains Windows exclusive. Certain enterprise environments depend heavily on Microsoft ecosystems. But for the average home user, browsing the web, watching videos, editing documents, gaming casually, and communicating online, Linux is more than capable. And perhaps that's the real story. Linux doesn't need to replace Windows entirely. It just needs to be good enough. And today, it is more than good enough. It's competitive. It's polished. It's useful. When the barrier to entry disappears, the conversation changes. It's no longer "can I handle Linux?" It becomes "why am I still using Windows?" As Linux continues to streamline installation, improve driver support, expand gaming compatibility, and refine desktop environments, it chips away at the last remaining advantages Windows once held. Ease of use was the biggest one, and that advantage is no longer guaranteed. In fact, for many users, Linux might now be the easier choice. No forced accounts, no intrusive ads, no heavy background services, just a clean system that does what you ask it to do. The narrative has flipped. Linux isn't becoming harder or more complex. It's becoming smoother, more approachable, more intuitive, and as it does, Windows faces a serious challenge. Because if Linux is just as easy, or even easier, then what's left to justify staying? We are witnessing a subtle but powerful shift in the desktop world. Linux is not just for enthusiasts anymore. It's for everyone, and that may be the biggest change of all. Windows hasn't disappeared. It's still dominant, but dominance built on convenience can erode when alternatives become equally convenient. Linux is no longer the underdog struggling to catch up in usability. It's standing shoulder to shoulder, offering freedom without sacrificing simplicity. And that's why the statement doesn't sound crazy anymore. Linux is becoming too easy. And Windows may have officially lost its greatest advantage.